Since the summer, massive peaceful protests have gripped Belarus, calling for an end to what's known as Europe's last dictatorship.
Minsk has never seen anything like this.
But the government has struck back. Why did these protests happen? And why, months later, have they failed to push Alexander Lukashenko from power? Belarus is a country of 9 million, sat between Europe and Russia. In 1991, it declared independence from the Soviet Union. But 3 years later, Alexander Lukashenko, a former collective farm manager, was elected president, promising to restore order. He's been in power ever since, 26 years, tolerating no political opposition.
I think in many ways, Belarus was among the least changed, least reformed parts of the old Soviet system. It was pretty repressive. The system went through the motion of holding things called elections, but they're never free and fair.
An election triggered the current crisis. A desire for change had been building, driven by a stagnant economy and changing society, one that increasingly looks more like Belarus's modern European neighbors. Lukashenko's dismissal of the coronavirus pandemic inflamed that anger.
People of Belarus just want to be free. They want to feel a freedom. They want to live not under dictatorship.
We hope that this will show him that we don't want him here and we want him to go away.
After Lukashenko jailed most of his opponents, the opposition united behind an unlikely candidate. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, a former teacher and stay-at-home mum, who stepped in to run for her husband, a popular blogger who was jailed. Her platform was simple: free all political prisoners and hold real elections. She and 2 other women attracted huge support.
It was extremely difficult for our people to wake up, but we did this year.
When the election came in August, though, it still gave Lukashenko over 80% of the vote. The result of what international observers and the opposition say was flagrant ballot rigging. Peaceful protests began immediately. Authorities responded with extreme violence. Police were detaining thousands of people. Protesters forced their release, and as they came out, hundreds described systematic abuse and torture.
No matter what, they just hit you. They ask you a question, they hit you. They ask you to dance, to sing. If you're not doing something, they just hit you.
The extreme violence sent a wave of anger across Belarusian society, including those once considered Lukashenko's base. The protests exploded, becoming the biggest Belarus has ever seen. Hundreds of thousands flooding the streets.
It's been a week since that election where Alexander Lukashenko supposedly won 80% of the vote. But when you look around at this colossal crowd, just a sea of red and white, you can see why people don't believe that was a real election.
The massive, mostly leaderless protests continued each Sunday, with women often taking the leading role.
We are ready to go for the victory, and it takes a lot of time and energy, but we are ready.
But Lukashenko hasn't seen it that way. The security forces remained loyal to him, and slowly authorities regained more control, using familiar tactics.
As we look at all of these people, the question they're beginning to have to face up to, and that there isn't really a clear answer to yet, is how this becomes the toppling of the regime.
Belarus's summer of freedom is giving way to a hard winter. Virtually all key opposition leaders have been detained or driven into exile. The crisis became a stalemate. One reason Lukashenko managed to stabilize himself is Russia. From the beginning, there were fears Russia might intervene like it had in Ukraine following its 2014 revolution. But unlike Ukraine, in Belarus there was no strong anti-Russian feeling.
People are not pro-Russia or anti-Russia. People are not pro-Europe or anti-Europe. We're just anti-Lukashenko.
But in the end, Russia still threw its support behind Lukashenko. President Vladimir Putin threatened to send security forces into Belarus if protesters try to violently remove Lukashenko.
Putin himself worries about the precedent of a long-standing authoritarian leader of a neighboring state losing power to a peaceful popular demand for change. That would set a very worrying precedent for him.
And as importantly, Russia's support also comes with a price.
So the story in recent years has been Putin trying to exert pressure on Belarus, trying to force Belarus to accept some strong form of a so-called union state, which would essentially mean that Russia ran the most important aspects of Belarus without quite absorbing it fully into its own territory. And Lukashenko has resisted that, and that has created difficulties and tensions between them.
The crisis has given Putin an opportunity to force Lukashenko to accept more Russian control. In late October, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya tried to break the stalemate, calling for a national strike. Some strikes did begin, but as before, they failed to gain traction. And since then, the protests have come under even greater pressure. Their hopes of toppling Lukashenko in the near term now seem remote.
In the past 30 years in Central and Eastern Europe, we have seen a lot of situations like this. Belarus resembles them, but it's also different in some ways that do make change harder. And yet, I just offer the thought that in every one of those other cases, it's the people who have ultimately won. When the vast majority of the population no longer wishes to be ruled in a particular way, ultimately the status quo is unsustainable and real change happens.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.